Great, we're all set?
Yeah.
Perfect. Hello everyone, thanks for making it today. What was your name?
David.
David, nice to meet you. I think I met everyone in the room today. Thanks for coming in, and today I'm going to talk about your personal and professional orbit. I run a podcast that you may have heard about, and I'm going to go a little bit in depth as to what I'm investigating and why. There we go.
Yeah.
This is a photo of Joey Ito. Joey Ito is the director of the MIT Media Lab, and he teamed up with author Jeff Howe to write a book called Whiplash. The premise of this book is the world is going to change dramatically and at an accelerating rate every year. Technology gets cheaper and faster, and in this book they explore how you can orient your mind so that you can keep up with the pace of accelerating change. Thinking about that makes me exhausted. And I think a lot of us can kind of relate to the idea of trying to keep up with work structures that are not sustainable. And eventually, if we're trying to keep up high performance work to a changing environment, sometimes it doesn't match up and it can lead to burnout. I think burnout is something that we all can relate to. The BuzzFeed Millennial Burnout article just showed us how expansive it was, and I think that it's because of the structure in which that we're trying to work. We're trying to balance 9 to 5 old school work environments with a new flexible and web-based frontier. So I picked up a book in 2018 called Designing Your Life. It is based on Stanford's most well-attended class. They took the idea of personal life fulfillment and career fulfillment and tackled it as a design challenge. One of the concepts that they introduced was gravity problems. Now, a gravity problem is something that you probably can't change with your own individual resources. If you're biking up a hill, it would be silly to change the laws of gravity to make your bike up the hill easier, and instead you should probably get a better bike or maybe hop into a car. So thinking about all this, in 2017 I met Cheyenne Barton, who's with us today. Cheyenne was one of the first people I'd ever met who made a full living selling art online. She had a YouTube channel and also an Instagram with over 50,000 followers, and brought in her full-time income through her online shop. Through Cheyenne, I got the idea that this was the kind of work that I wanted to be a part of, to leave the 9 to 5 structure and hopefully work for myself doing this kind of thing. So I started meeting other people through Cheyenne who did similar work. This is Martin and Saylor. They actually work out of Pike Place Market, and they sell handmade pastry pets. They're plush toys that are like donut hats and maple bears, and through meeting people through Pike Place Market, they have a worldwide internet presence. And that led to more and more interviews, and it eventually became a series where I found people who I call web-based creatives who make a living online. Another one who is also with us today is Jordan Clark. Jordan Clark has hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube and makes a living through her online shop. So I saw a bunch of people, a lot of them young, who were making a living on their own terms. And I wanted to know, how does someone get started in this field, and how do they make it work? I realized very quickly that a lot of these creators were facing the same problems. And it had to do with managing the amount of work and dealing with burnout and overwhelm. So I wrote down all of the problems that came up the most often, and I put them together into a book with Cheyenne. It's called Sustainable Loops. You can buy it on Amazon.
Are you going to send us this presentation?
Yeah, absolutely. I can make that happen. So, my solution to managing kind of a fluid work structure is the concept of orbits. And an orbit is a sustainable loop. The opposite would probably be a feedback loop, something that spirals out of control and eventually destroys itself. And an orbit would be a work structure that does not lead to burnout. It's something you could do continuously and consistently, which is one of the most important things you can do with an online business.
What's the name of your book?
It is called Sustainable Loops, Getting It Together Without Falling Apart.
Nice. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. So, in thinking about orbits, some of the things that we can gain, if you are working a 9-to-5 job, this is relevant to you because it maximizes your productivity. If you wanted to kind of get into a managerial position, it allows you to think about how your employees are working and how you work in the most effective way. It's about constant revision and being able to be resilient in a changing environment. If you are a aspiring small business owner on the internet, this is also relevant because you have to be your own manager. And you are not just going to be making watches, for example, you're also going to have to be your marketing person. You're going to have to be a fulfillment center, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to go through 3 of the most common things that came up in my work interviewing folks about their small businesses. Number 1 is pricing. Direct-to-consumer creatives almost always undervalue their work. There are an assortment of reasons for this, one of which is that creators tend to only think in terms of cost of materials and not the amount of time that went into making the product, and also the time that went into honing in their craft. It reminds me of a story about Pablo Picasso. There was a woman who saw him scribbling on a piece of paper in a restaurant, and she said, "Hey, that's really good, I would like to buy that." And he said, "Sure, it's $10,000. And she said, "But I saw you draw that in 30 seconds. And he said, "No, this took me 40 years to make."
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to get out of your own head when you are the person making the product. It's hard to conceptualize the value that you're bringing to someone else. So the solution to this would be do your market research. It can be anyone, it can be a friend, it can be a sample size of your potential customer, but say how much would you pay for this product or service? And more often than not, the answer will likely surprise you. Second most common problem is time management, and I think time management across the board is difficult for everyone. As we touched on earlier, you will have a lot of different tasks that you'll have to do. I've listed some of them here. Product designer, accountant, web personality, web developer, customer service rep. And the more and more audience you have or customers, your work increases tremendously. As a solo run business owner, this is not sustainable. To focus on time management, you have to understand that running a business is not just creating the product, and delegate times for the other money-making functions of your business. Anthony Bourdain talks about this in his book Kitchen Confidential. He often saw folks who wanted to start a restaurant because they were very good at throwing dinner parties. And so they would open their restaurant and create the dinner party experience every night, but they wouldn't look at the business side of whether or not what they were doing was sustainable. They were just trying to create a vibe. And Bourdain would walk into these restaurants, see immediately that things weren't going as planned on the back end, and not work there. Your job as the creator, write things down. if you are overwhelmed with the amount of things that you have to do, writing them down first and foremost is the best way to make it immediately manageable and to take it out of your brain soup. Once you write down all of your tasks, you can then identify short-term and long-term goals. You can prioritize and break up larger tasks into manageable steps. Third most common problem, and this one's my favorite, is scale. The great thing about the internet is that you can publish a book and it has the potential of reaching a worldwide audience. But you don't have a team to communicate to that worldwide audience. I had a client who had a pen pal service that they were doing for customers. And the customers loved it, but it was so time consuming for not enough pay that it wasn't sustainable and they couldn't keep it going. The same client started doing downloadable zines, and that was something they could upload to their website once, people would purchase it, and it required no fulfillment, no cost of distribution, and could potentially scale to thousands to millions at no extra work to the creator. So when you're thinking about scaling your business, you gotta get creative, and in the words of my friend Zach, if it doesn't scale, then what the fuck are you doing? It's gonna be a feedback loop and get out of control. So, be realistic and be creative. Understand fully the things that one person can accomplish and make peace with that. That's a gravity problem. And be creative using the tools that you have and think to yourself, what is a way that I can do, that could provide a product or service that will reach the numbers of my targeted audience. Just a week ago, I was able to interview Sahil Lavingia of Gumroad. He was the founder at age 19, and I think to this day, their platform has made a total of 200 million for their creators. And I asked him in our interview, what succeeded on Gumroad? Because I wanted to know the process of that work. And he said, there aren't products or services that do particularly well on Gumroad, but specific people. And the people that succeed are the ones who get in the habit of trying, refining, and trying again. They have found a sustainable loop, an orbit in which that they can refine their process and get better and better, even as things change each year. The military implements this in a practice called an OODA loop, which stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And once you enter an unfamiliar environment, if you get in the habit of observing, orienting, deciding, and acting, you prevent against choice paralysis. You can move very quickly and overpower your enemy just by moving quickly and learning very fast. The same idea applies to small business. You should always be in the habit of going through an OODA loop to determine your next course of action, because the worst thing you can do is get stuck and not. I'm going to give 2 examples of how I have implemented orbits in my own life. One is, right now I work a day job and also run the podcast. I wanted to figure out how not to burn out. I got in the habit of every 2 years having a really bad breakdown, and I would have to build from scratch from there. And I realized this is not sustainable. So what I started to do was identifying the things that I needed in my lifestyle and making sure that all of those points happened. So right now, my daily life is very consistent. My friends joke that they know more about what I'm going to do in a day than they know what they're going to do. But I wake up at 7:30 a.m. each day. I have a work block from about 10 to noon, where I work on podcast and orbit-related topics. and then I work my day job from 12:30 to 6, and then I have designated no work time that is mandatory from about at latest 9, but I can push it earlier. But this helps me because every single day I am refreshed, and I know that if I start working at 9, I'm gonna go to bed at 3, and as I yell in our household often, it's not sustainable. The second Orbit implementation has been with the podcast. So the podcast is leading into my own small business venture. And what I needed to work under was not having a lot of money, not having a lot of resources, not knowing a lot about the field. And I wanted to maximize that as much as possible. So I started conducting interviews, and the interviews served so many functions. First of all, I was able to network. I met a lot of people who had the jobs that I wanted, and I could ask them questions if I needed to. This is also something I pulled from Designing Your Life. They said, you know, it never hurts to ask for directions, and I've been often surprised at the people who are willing to sit down and get coffee with me. Second, through filming these interviews, I was able to get holistic research and basically a browsable library of people's experiences. So not only did I meet new people, but I built my knowledge of what people were actually doing in selling their art online. The videos then, when published on YouTube, built a community online and also served as a portfolio for, hey, this is what I do if anyone's curious, and this is proof that I actually do it. Running a modern day business is like building a car as it's rolling down the road. And it has to do with how quickly things change year to year. It requires constant experimentation, and if you're building a car, it's very clear when something's not working and you should abandon it. Many of you have probably read The Lean Startup. Eric Rice calls this validated learning, where you at least try something, and the benefit that you get from picking a price and giving it a shot, even if it costs you very little, you learn so much for the next time that you iterate it. I'm going to end with this quote. It's very popular as people try to establish habits. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. If you have a sustainable rhythm from day to day, you will continue to have a sustainable rhythm throughout your life, especially if it's working. If you manage to spend 10 minutes to an hour on the thing that you're working on daily, those hours compound. And so resilience, sustainability, can be small, but the sustainable nature of it allows for you to build up a reservoir of experience. The Orbit is definitely in its upswing as far as the people we've been able to interview and the things that we're learning. Currently, we're starting to take paid clients who want to know more about how to run a small business online with a sole business owner or creator. And since we've interviewed so many creators, we're also beginning to interview people like Sahil Lavingia, who provide services for them. So on the docket are companies that provide healthcare to digital nomads, and also people who build tools online for people to teach themselves the things that they need to. This September, I will be attending XOXO, which is a conference for independent creators who make a living on the internet. So we'll report back and you'll hear it online. My main goal is to help individuals become managers, because as the workforce becomes decentralized, more independent, software enabled, it depends a lot on the individual to be able to manage their time effectively. And so my hope is that by sharing all these resources and showing examples of people who have succeeded in it, that more and more will be equipped for the future of work. And that is all I have for you today. I am open to any questions or comments that you may have.
What's TUI to us?
Thank you, thank you.
Okay. Next speak.
Lot of Twitter.
We're a Twitter-based household.
Does anyone have any questions at all? Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I need the time to explain what I'm doing. So,
Yeah. If you need time.
yeah, so what I'm doing is like, as you see, I'm a creator
Mhm.
and making videos and doing the project, but not alone, but with I got a team, and also at the same time, I'm in the degree. So this degree is like basically learn how to lead the team and how to do the entrepreneurship and how to do innovation in the market. But not in the lecture, not in the classroom, but by you.
Yes.
So we create a company with 50 people, and then we are working together and living together. And this part is the most challenging part because we know like individually how to, where I need to go, where should I be, like what is sustainable for individually, everyone knows, but by working together and by living together, like it breaks everything. Then
Right.
it's super challenging. So I don't know. I couldn't find the right answer for me. How can I manage all this?
Right.
Yes.
I've experienced this as well. I have noticed that trying to organize people is very difficult. It's a gravity problem that scheduling is always a pain in the ass. So if I'm going to be working with large groups of people, I make sure that the tasks are in short of a time frame as possible because I know the window of coordinating a lot of people is very slim. I also tend to try to avoid having large teams for this purpose. The most effective way that I've got a lot of people in one place is almost by building a regular event. The best example was a weekly poetry workshop that I helped create in Portland, Oregon. And it happened every Sunday at 10 p.m. in the same bar. And just word got around, and eventually we had attendance of like 10 to 20 people every week. And that was reliable. And so what was better about that is that I wasn't pulling people and like wrangling a herd of cats. I said, hey, this is happening all the time, and if you want to work on it, we have this space open to you. And I see more and more events like Lunch and Learn, and I went to a Ideas Over Dinner series where people have these monthly meetups that kind of harness people in a better work structure. So I don't know the answer for as far as like running a business, but I have the tools that are there, especially if you want it to be more fluid.
What did you call the dinner meeting?
The poetry workshop was called Late Night Poems.
What did you call the dinner?
The dinner is something that I was invited to. It's run by a gentleman in Seattle. It's called Ideas Over Dinner.
Ideas of
Yeah.
Who runs that?
I can look it up and give you his name. I believe
Probably
his
on the
name
map.
is Phil with an F.
So it's really interesting. I like the idea of like your podcast interviewing people. How did you like push yourself out there to like get to contact people? How did you convince them, hey, you should definitely interview with me on my podcast?
Oh, like how did I get people on?
Yeah.
Great question. Have any of you ever heard of Nardwuar? Nardwuar, the human serviette. This is
I only know of him because of him.
Nardwuar, the human serviette, is a radio personality that broadcasts and reports on music in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. He has a TED Talk. I highly recommend. It's super weird. He's a weird dude. to illustrate, Nardwuar talks like this, and he wears a hat. He's strange, but he interviews. He has interviewed Snoop Dogg, Henry Rollins, A$AP Rocky, just a bunch of musicians, and he says, he says, the way I got these interviews was just asking. And I didn't believe him, so for this interview series, I saw Sahil Lavingia, who is like a CEO of a company, and I just messaged him on Twitter. I was like, hey, can we do an interview? And he said, yeah, absolutely. With Picarar. Is anyone familiar with Picarar? Angela Wynn. She is an illustrator on the internet that draws basically, she does long Pikachus.
Sheebs. Her sheebs.
Sheebs, yes, as well. Dogs wearing hoodies. I messaged her on the Instagram, sent her an email, and I said, hey, do you want to do an interview? She's like, absolutely. And what I learned is that most people are willing to sit down and just talk about their career if you just are sincerely willing to listen. One of the best stories, Joe Ray is a award-winning food columnist for the New York Times. He also writes for Wired, and I learned that a friend of a friend volunteered at the same bike shop as him, and I used that connection. I was like, hey, I know Keenan, can I sit down and get coffee with you? He's like, yeah, absolutely. And I was able to get riding advice from Joe Ray. So I would say if you just ask from a very sincere place, we're not just trying to network, we're sincerely asking, how did you get here? Because I want to get here too.
Amanda Palmer does a TED Talk about Just Ask.
Yeah. And is it kind of the same deal? It's just
No,
nothing really to lose.
she's got the worldwide moratorium on what's on Just Ask.
Yeah.
It's her thing. She wrote a book called Just Ask. Connor, you haven't said the name of your podcast.
It's called The Orbit.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you're looking for it, if you Google Connor the Miller anywhere on the internet, it'll show up. Yeah.
Do you have any tips on Facebook and Instagram in terms of like marketing?
Yes, absolutely. So, marketing on the internet it pays. Number one, consistency is key. If you are in a consistent schedule if people are interested and they know when they're going to get new content from you, that is key. The goal of The Orbit is to come out every Sunday, more or less, and so people know when we're going to get new content, and it serves as marketing. So be consistent. Also, the gravity problem that you are one person, you have to realize that you have the potential of maybe being on 10 channels and putting a lot of shit out there. Think about your target audience. Find out what's reasonable to you. I recommend, like, for me personally, I'll be on my bus ride every day. And I'm zoning out on my bus ride. And that's the perfect time to be like, okay, I'm going to do a blast on Instagram and Twitter. And then when I'm sitting before I work, I'll do it on Facebook. And because that has been ingrained in my rhythm, it's consistent, I know it's always going to get done, and it's not unmanageable. I also find that sharing information, like really insightful information for free, is the best marketing. People love how-to videos. Great.
I have a more entertaining
Yes.
question.
Yeah.
What's been like your most unexpected or surprising interview?
That is a great question. My most unsurprising interview. I want to say that it was with one particular creator, and I think I was surprised because they had maybe 2,000 followers on Instagram, and they only opened up their shop maybe twice a month, and they were making monthly $6,000 consistently, $3,000 each time they opened up their shop. And I was like, this is wild to me. Like, does this scale? And I was looking at all their papers. I was like, this does scale. And the lesson there was that this creator knew their target audience.
What was their product?
Their product stickers.
I need stickers. Can you tell me?
Yeah. It's where you need to get stickers.
Yeah.
If you Google online, I know there are a bunch of like sticker production companies, Sticker App, Vinyl Disorder, etc. But a lot of people make a lot of money off stickers.
But this particular person?
Oh, you can. So I'm intentionally leaving it confidential for this particular because it's like a financial situation. There was another Kickstarter I saw recently that was also stickers. They set a goal of raising, I think it was $200 to produce their first run, and they raised $5,000.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it's
People love stickers.
people do love stickers. So I think the surprising thing is, in looking at all of this, people are really willing to pay money if you are catering if you know your audience and if you're targeting directly towards them. And also, the fortunate thing about stickers, you're like, that doesn't make sense, but it scales. Yes?
Could you give us a suggested reading or suggested listening list?
Yes, absolutely. Do you have the book? This is one of the best books I've ever read. That's why I had a picture of Joey Ito to start. Yeah.
Whiplash.
Whiplash by Joey Ito. May I? Yeah. My entire business structure is based on this book. So each chapter goes over strategies that are more helpful in a changing, accelerating environment. So for example, one thing that I put into effect, resilience over strength, having practice over theory. It just encourages people to experiment and create rapid prototypes on the internet. Joey Ito also has a podcast in which he interviews basically his colleagues.
What's it called?
It is called Joey Ito's Conversations. And because they're like just conversations, it's not heavily produced or anything, but the information is so tangible. Lastly, some of you may already be on this, Seth Godin's podcast, Akimbo. Every week it's like 20 minutes and it blows my brain out of the water. You listen to it too?
He's a smart guy.
He's a really smart guy.
And he's funny.
He is funny and he pushes for a lot of the same strategizing. He's so smart, his information is free and is pushing for the future of work as well. I'm trying to think. Yeah, those are, I think, my main book suggestions. What I've started to do also on the Orbit, the part of the YouTube series is me just recommending books. Because that's all I do. Great, thank you. Yes?
Can I recommend one podcast?
Yeah.
Creative Pep Talk by Andy J. Pizza is also helpful in terms of like...
Andy J. Pizza?
Yep. His last name is Pizza.
Is it really pizza?
I think so. I don't know.
I
don't
accept it.
I don't think it's his birth name, but it's his like professional name.
Got it.
So.
Great. Thank you so much for attending today. If you have any further questions, you can reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter. And I will see you in my orbit.
Hey, there it is.